The Retirement Cafe podcast, the 9 accelerators for a successful retirement. This week, estate planning. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast with me, your host, Justin King. If you're thinking about your retirement or already retired, you're in the right place. My aim is to help you plan for and live a successful and meaningful retirement. Retirement is far more than just a financial event. It's a significant life event, a major transition, which will bring with it new challenges and opportunities. So each episode contains tips, information, and inspiration to help you feel more informed and confident about your retirement. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello and welcome to my podcast. This week we return to our series of the 9 accelerators for a successful retirement. This is the 7th out of 9 episodes and we're talking about estate planning. If you've missed the first 6 episodes, check out the show notes for this episode to find links directly to each one. Now, estate planning is a vast topic, but I will aim to discuss the main principles and what I suggest you consider when tackling your own estate planning. I will also signpost you to other episodes that delve into certain topics in more detail as we go through this episode and include links into the show notes so you can get into more detail where it's most relevant to you. The areas we will discuss today are the purpose of estate planning, and it's not just about the money. What makes a good estate plan, wills, letter of wishes, powers of attorney, and the fundamentals of inheritance tax planning, as well as other non-financial steps you can take to get your estate in order. As you probably know by now, the 9 accelerators in this series are from the framework we use in my retirement planning firm, MFP Wealth Management, to be sure we've addressed all the areas of planning that allow you to retire with confidence, clarity, and choice about how you spend your retirement. We call this framework our Retirement Success Program. So without further ado, let's get into this episode and welcome back my wife, Kathy, to fire the questions. Welcome back to the podcast, Kathy.
Thank you. I can't believe we're already on the 7th episode of this series. So today, obviously, estate planning, and I think it's probably quite interesting to start with a really simple question of what is the purpose of estate planning?
Well, I suppose that's different for everybody, but for me, the purpose of creating an estate plan is to reduce the burden on your loved ones at the end of your life and after you've gone. But I've got a question for you. Being brutally honest, how confident are you that you will die organised? Hopefully, you've got many more years ahead of you yet. But if you had to answer that question on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is I've got a will, but it's out of date, to 10 being I regularly review my estate planning documents, where do you feel you're at?
Oh, gosh, certainly not at a number 10, but I have got a will, have got powers of attorney, so 6 maybe?
Well, you need maybe to find a good financial planner, give you some advice.
Sounds like a good plan.
Well, as you know, in the work that we do, we work with experts in tax, wills, trusts to make sure our clients' estate planning is up to date, tax efficient, and well organised. So in a nutshell, estate planning is about ensuring your will and any expression of wishes are up to date. You have powers of attorney in place, and any trusts are still relevant or put in place if needed. Ultimately, good estate planning means that you're maximising your wealth to provide financial security for yourself and your family.
Now, that's interesting because I think many people might think that, good estate planning is just about tax and about your money, but you're saying it's more than that.
Well, obviously mitigating tax is important to many families, but the overriding objective when all is said and done is to often to secure the use of your wealth for your family's benefit. And sometimes to get the best possible outcomes for your family, you might have to accept that paying some tax is inevitable.
So have you got an example to illustrate what you might mean there?
Well, I mean, often wealth is tied up in a family home. Large amount of wealth is tied up in a family home. And, once your estate gets, 2, 3, 4 million pounds, and that's a lot of that wealth is in a family home, you might not want to move. And you might just accept that, okay, well, the family's going to have to pay some inheritance tax on this, but this is our home and this is where we want to live, and so be it. Different people, different strokes, So sometimes you've just got to accept that there is a tax bill if your own personal circumstances dictate it. The easiest way to not pay any tax, of course, is not to have any assets. Well, so we can all be tax free. But I can show you how to not pay any tax at all. It just means that you won't be working or earning or acquiring any assets.
Absolutely. Well, obviously we've mentioned the word estate a number of times already. Maybe you could just, for clarity, explain what's meant by the word estate when it comes to estate planning.
Yeah, well, I think the Oxford Dictionary definition says that all the money and property you own at death is your estate. It's also the term used by HMRC for the purpose of probate. So it could be defined as everything compromising your net worth. So all your land and property, possessions, which are called chattels, financial securities or investments, cash and other assets you own or have a controlling interest in.
Okay, so where should someone start then when they're thinking about creating an estate plan?
Well, the most important document, of course, is your will. Your will needs to take your lifetime planning into account to reduce the chances of additional tax becoming payable on your death. Obviously, you do not want your beneficiaries to receive less than was intended simply because you did not make a suitable will with a solicitor who is capable of understanding and advising on lifetime estate planning. Mm-hmm. It's important to know that if you die without a will, that's known as dying intestate, arranging your assets and affairs will become very complicated for those you leave behind. Intestacy rules are incredibly complex. If a suitable beneficiary is not found, the government may be entitled to seize the full amount of your assets on your death. Several factors are in play, including your marital status, whereabouts you live in the UK, and the value of your estate. There's a great episode with solicitor Holly Meoville Hawkins, that's 130, I think, where we discuss dying intestate and statutory wills, which you might like a listen to.
Great. So what does make for a good will?
Well, you need to value your estate, get an idea of what it's worth, what your estate will be worth by drawing up a list of your assets and liabilities. Ideally, you'll have a lifetime cash flow, which shows what your estate is likely to be worth on your death, taking account of the needs to pay for care fees and other costs that may come your way. Of course, you don't know when you're going to die. So the modelling we do in the cash flow is that we look at it, what would it be today if you died tomorrow type of thing. And also if you have a long and fulfilled life, you live to 100, what's it likely to be then? You can hear all about the lifetime financial forecasting in episode 114 of our podcast, as it was the second accelerator that we covered in this series. We'll put a link in the episode below in the show notes to that episode. Obviously, you need to decide how you want to divide up your estate, what will go to whom, but include details of what should happen if your chosen beneficiaries have died before you. And if you have children and you want to look after them, you also need to decide who will look after them if you die before they turn 18, and also at what point it should be suitable for them to inherit your estate. You may decide to leave a donation to charity, and there's some tax breaks and tax efficiencies around inheritance tax planning if you do make large donations to charities. Choose your executors. Who's going to sort out your estate and carry out your wishes after your death? It's a very responsible job being an executor of someone's estate, and it can be a difficult job as well. You need to follow the correct procedures to sign your will, otherwise it might not be valid. You can, of course, write your own will, but you might need legal advice if you share a property with someone who's not your husband or your wife or a civil partner. You might need advice if you want to leave money or property to a dependent who cannot care for themselves. And if you've got several family members who may make a claim against your will, such as a second spouse or children from maybe a previous marriage. If your home is outside the UK, that creates further complications, or property overseas. And of course, if you have a business, that could provide further complications. Often people haven't thought about what would happen to their business and in the event of their deaths.
So there's a lot to consider, isn't there? There are quite a few situations when it's probably sensible to get legal advice on how best to draw up your will. Yeah, and I think one of the other things that gets mentioned quite regularly is letter of wishes, isn't it? What about one? Should everybody have a letter of wishes that sits alongside their will?
Yeah, well, a letter of wishes is a document that accompanies your will. It's not legally binding, but can guide your executors and trustees to ensure that your personal wishes are carried out. You must take care that a letter of wishes does not contain anything that could conflict with the will. The letter can advise on anything, but the most common things are who to notify on your death, or in some cases, who not to tell, the style of funeral that you may want, specific instructions regarding the service and where you would like to be buried or have your ashes sprinkled. Maybe list your main assets, including bank accounts, life insurance policies, expensive items or jewellery, where they are. This will all help your executors with their probate service. Having said that, these items should also be included in your will, as letters of wishes are not legally binding. Guiding your executors or trustees on how you would like any money managed or trust created in your will can also be placed in the letter of wishes. And maybe advising guardians on how you would like your children to be raised, maybe their education and where they live. So giving more detailed information to help your executors identify specific items you're giving away in your will, and providing explanations as to why you've excluded someone from the will if you think that it may be a controversial decision or challenged later. A letter of wishes should be written in plain English, signed and dated, but not witnessed to avoid any claim that it has become a legal will.
Okay. So it's quite an informal document in that respect, I suppose. Great. Okay, well, that's really helpful. So another key part of estate planning that you mentioned at the beginning is about putting powers of attorney in place. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so 2 lasting powers of attorney available: property and finance and health and welfare. You can go onto the Office of Public Guardian website and you can download the forms and complete them online, or put a link in there and pay the fee. It's £82 to register each one. So this is giving someone, for property and finance, we always suggest to our clients that they get a property and finance completed in the event of them becoming incapacitated. Very suddenly, someone could have a stroke or something like that, or be in an accident, that we can actually deal with someone regarding their investments. So just think about that for that purpose. In the event of someone happening to you tomorrow that you were incapacitated, who could step in and have the legal authority to deal with your property and finance? It's really,
and it can be for short. It can be for a short period as well, can't it? If you've got an accident and you're out of sorts for a while, but then you haven't lost capacity, but a couple of months later you're back and able to take over. That's fine, isn't it? It can just be enacted just for a short period of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really key document. I often think that a will and power of attorney should be enforced on people at 18. They should just have to have it. It doesn't mean you can't change it. It doesn't mean you can't shift it. But why not do it? The only guarantee that I've got, and I don't give many guarantees, but the only guarantee I've got is that you're going to die at some point. So let's have these documents ready. Why not do them? Some people have an enduring power of attorney. This is the kind of the predecessor of the lasting powers of attorney. It can still be used, but only can be registered when you've lost mental capacity, which can be more difficult to do. So the lasting powers of attorney, the LPAs, were introduced as a replacement for the EPAs, as you can provide more specific guidance on the 2 different areas, the health and welfare and the finance. and they are registered immediately. We've got episodes on these topics, so we'll add links again in the show notes for more details on wills and powers of attorney.
Great, brilliant. Okay, so moving on to the financial side of it, presumably the financial planning is kind of the foundation of any estate plan, really. Once you've got your will and even in terms of inputting into your will and your wishes and what you want to do, how you want to pass on your assets, you kind of need to understand where you are financially, don't you?
Yeah, there's a lot to it. So again, our cash flow model, we run an inheritance tax model in it, and it shows you based on certain growth rates and certain assumptions what the tax bill will be as you go through your retirement. And then, of course, there's some point where you can start balancing off. Okay, actually, it looks like now I've reached the age of, 86, and I only need a certain amount of reserves now to maintain my standard of living. I can maybe start thinking about giving money away or setting up trusts. So it's getting that balancing act all the way through your retirement, so that can inform you on your inheritance tax position. So it's really important to have a list of of all your assets and any debts, any liabilities. Because, of course, with all this, we can, if someone died today and the executors came to us, we could just give them a list and just say, here we go, this is what we know of these clients. We're often more informed than maybe the solicitor was who had a snapshot in time when your will was created of what your assets were, whereas we've got an ongoing, updated, live plan that we'll know what's going on at any moment in time. So, we'll understand what are the taxes due, on your estate, throughout the terms, which allows you to make an informed decision. Just to know, when making the list of all the assets, make sure you make a provision for funeral expenses, so that, again, your executors know what you would like to have happen.
Okay, great. So there are obviously some inheritance tax allowances, aren't there? So it might be worth just kind of skimming over those, just mentioning those really briefly, the main allowances.
So each individual has an inheritance tax allowance of £325,000 currently, which means that the amount of money you can leave when you die, and there's no inheritance tax bill on that part of the estate. So it's the nil rate band. So if you're a couple, that's £650,000, and you can also include, on top of that, if you own a property, is a residential nil rate band. So a couple can have up to £1 million of assets free of inheritance tax. The only kind of, as with everything, there's detail around it, but the residential nil rate band, to claim that, you need to be passing on the second of the husband and wife to die, or the partnership to die. It needs to go to a direct descendant, the property does. So any assets in your estate over the 2 lots of 325,000 and 2 lots of 175,000 residential nil rate band over the £1 million will be liable to the inheritance tax at the current rate of 40%.
Okay, great. So one way, obviously, then to try and reduce the value of your estate is perhaps to give away some of your assets during your lifetime instead of maybe waiting until your death. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, in fact, there's giving things away early. Obviously, if you survive 7 years, that's a pretty, there shouldn't be any inheritance tax liability on that. So if you can afford to give away money early rather than waiting and leaving large sums in your will, that could be really tax efficient. So you're allowed to give cash gifts of up to £3,000 a year. So with forward planning, you can give away a significant amount without having to pay tax. If you choose to give away more than £3,000 per year, the additional amount will be subject to taxation. So only that it'll fall back into your estate. The gift could be a potentially exempt transfer, but so it would be added back into the calculations on your death. Doesn't mean it will be liable to tax, it just comes back into the calculation. There are some types of gifts that are exempt from taxation altogether. These include gifts between spouses or civil partners, gifts to universities or charities. subject to certain rules, and any gifts given over, as I said, the 7 years before your death. It's really important to plan for these gifts. Ideally, get some advice from a qualified professional and keep a detailed record of all the gifts that you give, as HMRC can question any gifts that they feel don't fall within the rules at the probate stage. And of course, remember that you're not here any longer, so you can't explain to your executors what you were intending to do, how much you did it, why it was then, what, so actually having a good record is what we do for our clients, is make sure we have a good record. We even kind of fill in the inheritance tax forms with them in events that we've got a record, so we can go back each year and go, right, what gift was given when and to whom. For more details on inheritance tax planning, you can listen back to the second podcast episode with solicitor and chartered tax advisor Kurt Lee on avoiding inheritance tax traps. Or I did a later interview with Kurt on the residential nil rate band. That's
Great.
That's inheritance tax.
Great. That's inheritance tax, a quick overview of gifts. And then talk to me about trusts then. So what role do they play in estate planning?
Well, traditionally trust funds are set up to ring fence assets for children and young people who aren't yet financially independent. But trusts are also a fantastic way to reduce or avoid inheritance tax payments altogether. Trust funds are fully protected from inheritance tax and can be set up at any time. They can be used to provide advance payments drip-fed to family members to allow them to receive inheritance early. But trust funds also have benefits for those with life insurance policies, as they provide a significant amount of tax relief. Without trust funds in place, your life insurance payout is added to your estate and taxed. And when your life insurance is set up in trust, it cannot be included in any inheritance tax calculation. So aside from the financial... Sorry.
So I was just going to say, but trusts, it's quite complex, isn't it? It's one of those areas that, is quite specific. There's lots of different types of trusts, and definitely an area to get advice on. Definitely.
Yeah, and there are tax complications. So whereas we might have removed something from the estate, there can be, first of all, sometimes a payment into a trust actually can be a chargeable lifetime transfer. So it actually could have a tax bill attached to it. If it's in excess of the nil rate band. And also there can be, depending on the types of trust, there can be a 10-year tax charge on the amount in the trust. So whereas it's a good way of getting money out of your estate, and if you survive 7 years from doing it, it can be really beneficial, but there can be further tax consequences of the assets within the trust. So what I'm trying to get at, it's not, whereas it may have removed it for inheritance tax purposes, you may then get tax liabilities just because it's a trust. So we have to weigh all these things up when we're going, yes, we get you out of one tax, but we could be getting you into another tax. And then we have to look at what the outcome is and how that serves people.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so aside from the financial planning aspects of estate planning, an important part, as you mentioned earlier, is being well organised, isn't it, to reduce the burden on your family after you're gone. So what steps can people take in that respect?
So we talked about getting your will and a letter of wishes up to date and your power of attorney in place. Next, I think, talk to your family. Make sure your wishes are clear and everyone knows. Aim to reduce any confusion or conflict that might arise after you've gone, especially if there's long-standing conflicts within the family. I remember talking to Amy Costello of the Williams Group in episode 83, and she shared lots of tips on how to have those difficult family conversations about inheritance. Also, Leda Snyder of the Institute of Preparing Heirs in episode 59, she discussed successful wealth transfer and avoiding the old adage of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember they were 2 really interesting episodes, actually. And so if your family then understands your wishes, what else can you do?
Practical things like clearing out your house, declutter, so your family doesn't have to make those difficult decisions about what to keep after you've gone. Some people are great at this, like maybe your mum.
Yes, Mum's very good at clearing out. If you're listening, Mum, she's yes. Let's call her a bit of a minimalist. But I mean, we're very grateful, as beneficiaries, that we won't have to do that job. So that it's we might laugh about it, but it's a very important step to be able to take if you feel able to do so.
Yeah, yeah. It is fair to say some of the people find this difficult, and if you've lived in the same house for decades and decades, and you're a bit of a hoarder. It's a real problem.
It can be. So we've had guests on the podcast recently who've talked about services that they've developed that can help you get your paperwork in order as well, haven't we? You've spoken to a couple of people recently.
Yeah. So for After You've Gone, Vicky Wilson of Settle joined me in episode 129. The government tell us once service is great for letting all the government services know someone's died, DVLA, local council, etc. But there was no such service for the private sector. Settled is a new private sector tell us once service which informs over 750 private companies. So you don't have to contact each one of those in turn. In terms of getting organised before your death, within the next couple of episodes we have Ian Dibb discussing his service Once I'm Gone, which is an online platform that helps you organise not only your finances but memories and other documents that you want to hand to your loved ones. So look out for that episode.
Great. Okay, so what final words would you leave us with regards to estate planning?
Well, I suppose face up to it that it's going to happen. Someone's going to sort all this stuff out. So just be aware of it. I mean, that's the key thing. People don't like talking about death, but just accept that it's a reality. So why not have a plan? The rules around inheritance tax change regularly. So work with a qualified financial planner and a solicitor where needed to regularly update your estate plan. A good place to start is on the SOLLA website, the Society of Later Life Planning, and find an accredited later life planner like myself.
Brilliant. Great. Well, I think we've covered quite a lot about estate planning today, but obviously if anyone has any questions, I'm sure you'd love for them to get in contact with you. Absolutely.
And thank you for helping me explore estate planning today. I hope you found our conversation helpful, everybody. If you have any questions that popped up for you as you've listened or watched, if you'd like a second opinion on your estate plan, please don't hesitate to get in touch and I'll do my best to answer. You can reach me on email at hello@theretirementcafe.co.uk or via Twitter at JustinKingCFP. I've referenced a lot of other podcasts in this episode that you may want to listen to delve into more detail about certain topics. So check out the show notes for all those links, as well as to the other episodes in the 9 Accelerators series. As always, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts to help more people like you find us. Or share this episode with someone you feel may benefit. It really does help. So until next time, I'm Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.